All right, Akira, I can see your slides. Thank you. Oh. Can you guys see my slides? But this is not showing. I thought, do I have to do something on this one?
No, you shouldn't have to do anything on that one now. I'm not an
Thanks
expert
to your
on
slides.
this, but I tried to help you figure it out. You are sharing it though. Or you're
Yeah.
logged into Metaco, and you're connected with via the Ethernet cable. But, or no, you're not.
No, I'm not.
You're not, which shouldn't make a difference, really. It's just a better
Yeah.
connection, right? And you are sharing your slides in Metaco.
Yes.
No, I see them in the data tracker, but they're not. Where is
Oh.
Metaco? See, where's is your TEEP? Is that,
Yeah.
Okay, so you are. Okay, they're all available now. Oh, I see things. Okay. Can you?
Okay, let me refresh screen. Oops.
Huh. Oh, that's
Well,
weird. Okay.
yeah, that was interesting.
Okay, well, maybe you got bumped out. And
I
now
got
we'll
bumped out.
Go back.
I see all the slides in the video.
You had the misfortune of being in the Monday morning session. This is
I win.
yeah, you won the gold.
Yeah. Whoops.
Okay, so you know that you obviously.
Yeah,
you
I
joined,
had
but you
everything
don't-
turned
yeah,
off.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay,
I figured that much out.
Here we go. Seeing stuff, and then
Yeah, so I thought I went in
go
here
in there, try that.
and
There they
oh,
are.
there they are.
And
Okay.
then you want to, if you want to see them yourself, you've got to go to that view once you've opened them up, because that's the presentation view, but you haven't opened them up yet.
Well,
So-
that's what I did, and
Oh, so you got it, but they weren't there.
well, no, that's when it put me on the data tracker. See?
Oh, I see. Interesting. Okay, so let's go back and then let's see what happens. Oh, because you're going to share maybe from what are these? Presentation.
Gallery view.
That's the
taking.
poll, and then that's.
Yeah,
Okay,
it
so-
used to be that I could click and it would
Open it
automatically
up.
present. Oh, but you know, I was virtual. I don't know if that makes
Yeah,
a difference.
it should be basically the same. Just that.
I mean, I could just
So-
go to my folder and share.
I know,
But-
but let's see if you do. Somebody's supposed to be coming who knows more than me, but obviously
Okay.
I don't know anything. But we'll figure it out. So if you were to go to that again, you're really just in the data tracker. That doesn't make any sense.
Right?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Let's go back to TEEP, and then that's how you share a screen. What if you click share? Let's see what happens. And then it might ask you what you want to share.
Yes. Do you really
You
want
your
to
screen?
share?
Yes, but what do you want to share? And if you go to oh, it's just it's asked. I think that's you have to say yes, unfortunately.
Yeah. I don't know what it was asking me to share, but let's see if it'll share.
And then you can share a tab or a window or the whole thing. So if you wanted to share a Chrome tab or whatever, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, look, and then you can pick.
Yeah, but that wasn't the whole point. Okay.
There's that, but it's not.
So, but it's interesting. Oh,
Because that's going to be the queue.
I see the queue.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Okay,
this
and
may
then-
be good enough.
Yeah, do you want to change the view of it? So it's like, I don't know. Like
Yeah,
not
how do
just
I turn it into presentation view?
What are these? Can you hover over those and see what they are? fit to page. And what's that? That's gonna rotate it. So you want to close behind the scenes. Oh, was there something actually wrong? I don't know. They just said they're working. Okay. They up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, they do too. What's that over there? Maybe we can collapse that. Yay!
Ah.
Okay, so now you can make.
Okay. Right. Since I'm running late, I should go
there you
ahead.
go. Okay, all right. Then I think are you okay now?
I am in good shape.
Okay, and you can do it.
Okay. Thanks.
You can do it through Medico. You can advance it when you go there. So go back there to TEEP. I think you can click to. Am I wrong about that? How do you advance them?
Yeah, it's interesting when we're on site. It changes.
Yes.
It changed.
I'm so sorry. I thought maybe. Okay, well.
No worries.
We're gonna get a lot
Okay,
of
I see the queue here, but I keep losing the chat. Okay, for those on the call, I apologize. For those in the room, we are still trying to get everything going. Okay, at least you guys can see the slides. And I'm presuming those on the virtual can see the slides as well.
Yes, we can.
All right, thanks, Dave. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. And we'll kick it off. So, Didu, you're also remote?
Yes, I'm remote, Nancy. I'll take the notes.
Okay, thanks. And I'm also going to thank Ned and Hannes, but Didu, if you can help me with the, meeting minutes, that would be great.
Sure.
Okay, so with that, welcome everybody to the Trusted Execution Environment Provisioning. We were lucky enough to get the very first slot of the very first day of the very first hybrid, IETF113. So the note well still applies. I believe most of you, given that I'm running late, I won't read it. Most of you should be familiar with it. Meeting tips, the only thing that I thought I noted was to ensure that you're launching the Meet Echo. And for the Meet Echo, I usually launch it straight from the website agenda. And that's how I've gotten it to work. For those that are here, I think hopefully you all have turned at least your mic so we don't get the double echo, which I'm not hearing. And then for the remote participants, to improve your bandwidth, keep your audio and video off until you are ready to get on the queue. And one of the chairs, either Dudu and I, could recognize you. Okay, so code of conduct still applies. We went through that last time. I think this is a pretty small and chill group. We're courteous to each other. And be prepared to contribute and discuss the TEEP work. Okay, so Jabber is now attached to Meet Echo. We've got the chat going. I can see the queue on this other screen. Didu, if you can help me with the queue as well, we can go ahead and get going. Okay, so for the agenda bash, I believe I made all of the updates, but I want to make sure we got them all straight. So Dave, I've allocated 15 minutes for the architecture, 10 minutes for the transport one, and then I was going to have Akira go next to go over the hackathon report, and then give you as much time. And unless you really need more than the 45 minutes, what I was trying to do was allocate the last 10 minutes to Peng Ling, who wanted to present on confidential computing aware network. So any changes to the agenda, or are we good to go? Are we awake? Both in the room and virtually. All right, I will count that as a go. So with that, Dave, you want to kick it off, and it'll be easier if you share your slides for me. And
Okay, trying again. Can you hear me okay, Nancy?
Yes, I can. And I gave
I
you
can hear
access.
Yep,
But
I can hear
I'm,
myself echoing in the room.
so
So
I granted you screen, but I'm not seeing your slides.
So Nancy, I think only one person can be sharing slides at a time. So you would need to stop sharing in order for Dave to be able to do so.
I did it again. So go ahead, Dave, and try it again.
Okay.
Ah, I believe your deck should be coming up, Dave. There we go.
You can see screen now?
Yes, we can.
All right. Switch there. All right, that should look okay, I hope.
Yes.
All right. Hopefully the audio holds out throughout this session. Hey, everyone. Good to see people virtually. So I'm going to be talking about the draft 16 of the architecture document. Just as a reminder in our timeline, we did complete working group last call some time ago. We held the document until we were more sure that there were not going to be changes based on the protocol spec. So then we got to that point in July of 2021 when we submitted it to IESG. Ben recently posted some feedback. There's the link there that we're going to go through, and the draft was then updated. And so draft 16, the main changes are to address Ben's feedback. All right. So I'm going to walk through Ben's comments and then talk about what's changed in the spec. And so this is literally Ben's comments in the slide here, and the next two are what we did to address it. So I'm going to call out some main points here that Ben raised. This is the comment that I call the double-edged sword in the first line comment here. Right? And so he talks about the context of the architecture and maybe some security or privacy considerations, right? So I'll highlight in the second paragraph, he talks about, refers to RFC 8890, which is entitled The Internet is for End Users. And it talks about in a TE type of situation, right, then the risk is the perception of a conflict where the user doesn't have any rights because you can't see what's going on inside the TEE. And he says it might be good to have to acknowledge there's cases of the main value of TEEP, and this is Ben's wording, right, is to device owners potentially at risk of harm to users and discuss the trade-offs involved. And then the last point that's part of this is about that the TAM is a trusted party. And so to document the new privacy exposure where the TAM has access potentially to things that say the user sitting in front of the device, if there is one, if there is a user there, that there may be some privacy exposure there, right? So that's kind of the summary of this of this one here. And so we made two changes. One is in the introduction to set the context, and then one is in the privacy considerations section. So this is formatted with bolding and things, but this is the text that was added into the introduction section. Okay, so there's already some text there, and so this is just the new text in addition to all the other text that was already there that hinted at some of the things that Ben is pointing out. So this is the additional text. So the top line is one of the points. It says, TEs are typically used in cases where a software or data asset needs to be protected from unauthorized entities that may include the owner or possessor of a device. Okay. That phrase is roughly taken out of a Computational Computing Consortium white paper where a number of TEEP participants helped to review and or author the text in the white paper. And so my hope is that the CCC white paper, which you'll see linked in the references from the bottom of the slide there and in the document in the actual references section, would be okay with this. But a couple of common examples that hopefully people can understand is things like a gaming console, right? Where whoever is in physical possession of the gaming console, right, you're trying to protect the game against somebody cheating simply because they have access to a gaming console. Things like, an ATM, where the user standing in front of the ATM is not the one that's authorized to decide how much money comes out of that device. Things like, cell phones where it's used by mobile payments, hosted cloud environments, and so on. All these are very common use cases for TEs in general. What you'll see is there's nothing in this text here that's actually specific to TEEP, right? This is just explaining background information about the security assumptions and usability assumptions, what is the trust model around common TE cases to begin with, right? So this is before we get into the actual TEEP protocol part of the intro. And so to combat the potential risk of, oh, this conflicts with the Internet is for End Users RFC, right? The point is that such environments can be thought of as hybrid devices where one user, right, or administrator controls the rich execution environment, where a different, i.e. remote user or administrator controls the TEE in the same physical device, right? So the point is there's two different types of users, right? The one in physical possession and the user that's actually authorized to do things, but both of them are users, right? And so to try to put forward this notion that says it's actually for end users, they're just different classes of end users that control different things, right? And so then the last point is that there's also cases where there is no local user, there's only a remote user. And this would come up often in many IoT cases with headless devices where the only user is the remote TE administrator per se. And then we referred to CCC white papers that provide a much longer analysis. Because again, this point that Ben raised, this part is not really about the TEEP protocol. This is just about setting the context for TEs in general. Okay, so that's why we thought it was useful to reference the CCC white papers about usability, sort of use cases and scenarios for confidential computing in general and TEs in general. Okay, so that was what we did in the introduction text. And then the security considerations was the other part, or the privacy considerations in particular. So again, this is the actual snippet of new code. This was a new little section that was added into the privacy considerations, primarily for Ben's last point that you may be revealing information to the TAM, including information about a particular person that's sitting in front of the machine. And let me finish this slide. I see Brennan's in queue, so as soon as I finish this slide, I'll go back to whichever slide you want, Brennan. In the privacy considerations, right, again, it starts by reminding us of that applicability, right? This goes back to that intro text. Devices have a TE that protects data encode from the REE administrator, right, is one of the cases, right? And then again, there's two examples, the cloud hoster case and the device manufacturer case. And this is where the privacy risk is that data in the REE might be susceptible to disclosure to the TE administrator. And to explicitly choose to have a TE that's managed by another party. And so just to take those two particular cases, in the cloud hoster example, right, the choice to say the RE administrator is explicitly aware of the TE administrator is because in this example, the cloud hoster is offering a service, right? Your TE administrator can become a customer of the cloud and your TE administrator can then manage things that are hosted in the cloud. So that is the business model, right? In the device manufacturer case, like a gaming console or something like that, then it's a choice made by the person that purchases the device that that you're not going to have complete control over the gaming console, right? Because you're trying to get gaming out of it or whatever. So there's two examples, right? One because a service is offered in one direction, and the other one is because you make a purchasing choice. Those are just different examples of how to mitigate those risks, but those are just taken as examples. All right. So with that, I see Brennan is in queue. So
Go ahead, Brendan.
Hi, Brendan Morin. Can we go back to privacy considerations 1, please? Okay, so there's this question here about the double-edged sword and proving, and the user agreeing or accepting that the TAM is going to deliver what it says it will deliver. That's the whole point of attestation, not remote attestation in this case, but local attestation. Can't we fix this up with attestation?
you can fix up part of it with attestation. Attestation is certainly half of it. That's how you know the TAM is who you think it is, right? You
No,
still
no,
have
not
to
that part. No,
opt in
that's
this-
not what I mean.
Okay,
I'm not
go ahead.
talking about remote attestation. I'm talking about local attestation. The TEE proving to the user that it is indeed running the software it said it would run.
Yeah, and I think if I can jump in as Ben Kadek, the author, has a comment. Yeah, the local attestation can be useful in many ways. I think there's still sort of a requirement that the user trusts the crypto that provides the attestation, which is probably the case, but we don't have a great way to require or enforce. And I think Dave really sort of hit it on the nose. This is not specific to the TEEP protocol. This is just setting the stage for general concerns in the area of TEEs in general, and we are building a technology that is useful in some cases, and it also may be, there are some cases where it could be abused as well, but because there are positive value use cases that we can clearly describe, we're going to go ahead and do it. And so we know there are potential for abuse, but we're not going to have that block the entire work. That's the main goal
I
of our
appreciate this.
But I do want to
it seems
respond
to
to
me that
Brendan's
we need a-
comment, because I get your comment, Brendan. Go ahead and finish, but I do have an answer that's more than just what Ben said, but go ahead.
It strikes me that we need to take the big picture view as well. I mean, this is an obvious problem, and so we should address it. And even if that comes down to a security considerations comment, at least pointing the way to a solution seems like a good idea.
So the comment that I was going to make is that especially since TEEP has some use cases where you can have confidential code, and so when we talk about personalization data, we say the personalization data could even include code, and we have some text about that in various places as to how you could enable that. What that means is that the end user, meaning like the REE administrator or the human sitting in front of the device, whether it's a gaming console or whatever it is that has a TE in it, you may not know what the software is that's running inside there. So you can have attestation to answer your point, local attestation to answer your point, Brendan. And so you can get a hash that says, here's what's running, but you don't have a way to tie that to what you know that code is doing, right? Because the whole point is to keep that code secret from you. So you can't actually vet it yourself, right? Only the TEE administrator can vet that code. You, the end user, may not have access to that. You don't know what's running inside of your gaming console that's DRM protected, for example, right? So you don't have necessarily a way to say, how do I get faith that code is running and doing what I think it's doing, because you may not be allowed to know what it's doing, right? You just have to say, I'm choosing to buy the gaming console in the first place, and it's going to do some stuff, but that's the business model that I'm opting into there. And so to answer your point, I think what you're talking about is possible in some cases, but in general, TEEP has cases where that would not apply.
So I don't want to derail this too much more, but I guess the point I want to make is that strikes me as an exception, not a rule. I would argue that the more salient point, for me personally at least, would be that I want to know that my banking app hasn't had its TAM compromised and shipped me a Trojan instead of the TEE or the TA that's supposed to be delivered by my bank. So what I'd really like to know is whether I can verify that yes, indeed, the thing that has been shipped to me by the bank's TAM is actually the TA that they've got published on their website somewhere. So they have a mechanism to verify it locally on my system as well as via the TAM. It's a defense in depth question. And if you have the capability to do that but aren't describing it, I'm kind of at a loss.
So I think you're talking about your suggestion that there could be an additional text written into here, because I think you're addressing something that should be mentioned in the privacy consideration section. And so I think your comment would apply. I'm interpreting it as saying you're arguing that we should add another sentence to the text that's on the screen.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, if you would like to help us suggest such a text, text suggestions gratefully accepted, I think would be my quick response.
Okay, thank you. The only other comment I would make was on privacy considerations 2, arguing that arguing that the local user is not the end user sounds to me like an attempt to escape from the relevant RFC about the internet is for end users. Frankly, the end user is the person holding the device.
It is not arguing that the person holding it is not an end user. It's arguing that there are two end users, right? One is local, one is remote. In other words, there's another class of end user, not to remove the first one. So
administrators are not end users. They're people who exert control over end users.
In some cases, yes. In some cases, they are end users.
I don't. Well, I guess that's a question that the group needs to discuss, but I'm going to disagree with you on that. So that's
okay.
me.
So it sounds like, in your view, in your interpretation, there are some devices that have no end user. Right.
I would make the argument
if I'm an IoT
that
sensor in a place that humans can't reach, you're saying there is no end user in that case, right? And the internet is not for those devices.
I would argue that any time that one user exercises control over another user, the user being controlled is the end user.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't like the way this
Well,
is described
hold on,
abdicates
hold
the
on.
responsibility for protecting those users.
You will notice that that the word end is not anywhere in this text.
Yep.
You said end user, and this text does not actually disagree with you because it doesn't use the term end user.
Right.
It
I'm
uses the term
arguing that it
remote
should.
user, but never end user.
I'm arguing that where there is a remote user who is an administrator and there is a local user who is not, the local user is the end user. That's the point I'm making.
I get your point. I don't think that changes any text on the slide because it doesn't make any comments about end users. So it's not. There's nothing I think that's actually in contradiction to what your view is here.
If I can make a suggestion, because
Stop taking up time.
Yeah, because we're going to be running out of time. So
yeah, if you can take it to the list, or Brennan and Dave. Brendan, if you have suggestions on how to update the text, that might help, but it seems like there may be some
Yeah,
discord there. Yeah.
yeah, the document is currently in IETF last call since Ben did initiate that, and so any comments we can take in as part of IETF last call, and if there's wording suggestions, that's normal during IETF last call. Things are going to come
Yep.
up. So, all right, so I'm going to keep going. Okay, Nancy.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of out of time on this one, but
Okay.
it is what it is. So let's keep
Well,
moving.
This one is probably the most important document just because it's the context
That's
for
why-
everything else.
That's why I'm saying we should just keep going
Yeah.
on this one.
Okay, so this one was actually the other main comment where Ben originally posted this and the comments on the transport document, but actually it applies to all the documents. And so really the architecture document is the one that it really applies to as being the context one, okay? And so this one is talking about a denial of service where the REE can conduct a denial of service attack against the TEEP protocol. And so a compromised RE can cause a TEEP to not receive policy changes and thus be out of date with respect to policy. And so I think this is the text that we did to respond to this notion of DOS attacks, right? So we point out that you can cause a TE to not receive policy changes. You can cause the TE to be out of date with respect to policy. Mention that the way to address that is by using attestation. So you can reject things that are out of compliance from being able to do whatever you shouldn't be able to do when you're out of compliance. And then the point about TEEP brokers. A TEEP broker can make suggestions, but it can never decide or enforce what runs there. So in other words, there's no real elevation of privilege per se, that if you can compromise, say, a broker running the REE, you can't compromise the TEEP protocol. And then the last piece of text is that if you can compromise the rich execution environment, then one thing you could do, for example, is to remove a valid dependency from an untrusted application on a TA. So in other words, you got some application running the TE that depends on a TEA. If you can compromise the REE, you could say, hey, that untrusted application no longer needs your TA, okay to clean it up, okay? But out there, you're not really harming the TE per se, you're harming the untrusted application. And so the mitigations there is just normal security mechanisms in the rich execution environment. And so hopefully this addresses all those things, but this was not in the protocol, say, we put this in the architecture document. Okay. Unless I see somebody in the queue, I'm going to try to finish up this document here. Ben also raised a question on the text about, in the security considerations, about validating HTTPS certs. And so he asked, might OCSP or some other CRL mechanism be in scope? Should we mention these other RFCs? And so currently, we went back to the IETF113 discussion, and you can see the quotes in the minutes there from Russ and Ben. That's where we agreed to not reference OCSP in the TEEP protocol, although there the context was about end-to-end OCSP and not necessarily about the HTTPS certificate, but about their certificates in the TEEP itself, right? But extending from that, we said since it would be nice to not have to put another protocol into there, but I'm open to suggestions on this one. So what we did do is we still left the reference to 5280, but we added the phrase, but certificate status check protocols may not scale down to constrained devices that use TEEP. But this is why we do end-to-end keying inside TEEP protocol, even if it's inside HTTPS, right? So HTTPS just goes to the REE in general. And so even if you can compromise that, you haven't compromised the TEEP protocol because there's another encrypted session inside the HTTPS session. So. It sounded like Ben took this and put it out for IETF last call, so I'm going to keep going. We just wanted to raise visibility. If people think that is important, please let us know during this IETF last call period. But right now, all we've done is we've kept the reference to 5280, but not required OCSP or anything for HTTPS, just to allow it to scale down. So I think this is the last main slide on this one. There were 3 different bundling examples between you have an untrusted app, a trusted app, and some personalization data, and how do you package those 3 for distribution. We have 3 cases that the document mentioned. The first case is all 3 of them, right? The brackets say those 2 are packaged together and distributed via one protocol. The other bracketed section is distributed, say, via a different protocol or mechanism. And so we had 3 of those, and Ben pointed out, well, there's other ways to combine those. Why did you not mention those? And so that's what 4 and 5 are. We added those for completeness. We put in some text about, why they may be less applicable in some cases. And so we updated the list, as well as we updated the discussion of SGX and the discussion of trust zone. So it mentions which of all 5 of them, instead of which all 3 of them, are most applicable to SGX, which ones are applicable to trust zone. But those are, of course, not intended to be by way of limitation. Those are just examples. So how would they apply to, say, risk 5, as the Japanese folks are doing, or for other Intel or AMD or whatever else? The intent is not to cover all those, just to pick 2 examples that are sort of different implementations and say how TEEP would be applicable, or which parts of TEEP are applicable. So that was, I think, just editorial, but it was important because there may be cases where people actually want 4 and 5. So. But it may be difficult in certain implementations of TEs. All right. Last slide on architecture before we move on is just a couple of bullets here. There was a question about what's the difference between process connect versus process TEEP message in the abstract APIs. Why were there 2? And the answer was it's purely an editorial distinction to help understand things, where process connect is a request to request a new session. And process TEEP message is processing a message in an existing session. So since they're abstract APIs, you can always implement them as combined or split process TEEP message into multiple ones, whatever it is. This was just a convenient way to describe things to keep the concepts of new session versus existing session different. There was a comment about use of the same key for both signing and encryption, where Ben's point was that using the same key for both of those is an academic open question as to whether that weakens things or not, and so we put that point into text and basically used Ben's wording in 2 different places, one for the TE pair and one for the TAM pair. The same wording is in there. And then Ben suggested various other editorial nits that were just accepted as proposed. So, all right, so that's it on the architecture document. Any other questions before we go on? Nancy, I think transport is up next, right?
Yeah, transport's next. So I would say if there are any other questions, to take it to the list, just because
Then I'm going to switch to the
we're
next
running
deck.
out of time. Yeah.
Okay.
Or short on time, I should say.
Transport deck, not that one. It is this one. This one is short. Okay. Call. And so you can see the timeline there. So same thing is now that the protocol spec is stable enough that we don't think that there's major changes to transport. We don't think there's any changes to transport other than editorial ones. So we'll go ahead and submitting that. The main comment on this one was the DOS that was possible by the RE. As I mentioned, that one was addressed in the architecture document. The only change in transport was we added the sentence to see section 9 of the architecture document for security considerations specific to the use of TEEP. We didn't actually have that in the transport draft before. We referenced other things like things around HTTPS security and so on, but we didn't reference the TEEP architecture document, so we had that. Because everything else is addressed in the arch document. The main topics on the transport spec were comments about the HTTP references and then a couple minor points about the actual logic. So for references, we replaced RFC 6125 with an internet draft reference because that draft is already in the RFC editor's queue, meaning it's going to beat us anyway, so we just update the reference. There's 2 other documents, well, actually 7525 and another version of 6125. They have active BIS documents in UTA, but they are only drafts, and so right now it looks like they'll be lagging us, and so we could pull them in later if they happen to go into the RFC editor queue, but right now We are just referencing the posted RFCs, so we don't have down-level references. And the notable feedback, there was text in there that had been obsoleted by later TEEP protocol spec ones, which was long ago we had more than one TEEP media type when we supported both JSON and CBOR. Now that we only have CBOR, there is only one media type, and so we could remove text that implied that there could be more than one. So that removed several sentences. There's a logic point that says if the TAM ever receives the wrong content type, that you should treat that as an error. And of course, BCP 56bis, the how to use THP as a transport, doesn't require this. And so Ben said, let's make sure the working group is okay with this being a should. And so we left that, since we already passed working group last call, as a should. And the belief is that having the TAM treat that as an error actually prevents bugs and encourages more protocol interoperability. But of course, it's not a must, it's just a should. So we left it as a should because we didn't want to have to revisit working group last call. The unrequest TA, this is how you choose which TAM to send. I'm done with this TA now. All of my RE applications, all my untrusted apps that depend on it are now gone. The TAM URI was not one of the parameters to the abstract API in the transport spec, and so we had to update that for consistency, so then all the specs match. And again, Ben suggested some wordsmithing that was just accepted because they were just editorial notes. So that's it for transport. All right, Nancy, I think unless there's
Sounds
any
good.
questions, I don't see many
Yeah.
queues, so back to you.
I don't remember, Dave, I think you said, I don't know if I saw the changes on the transport spec, but Ben was good with all the comments?
Yeah, he put them out both for best call.
Okay.
Ben, you're welcome to speak up, but he said they both look good to me, and he put them out for IETF last call.
Excellent. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I remember seeing
The last call, and the last call got extended a week because it overlaps the IETF meeting. But, I was happy with everything.
Yeah, we could barely hear you, Ben, if you can repeat.
Sorry. Yeah, Dave's right. I put them out for last call because I was happy with all the changes.
Yeah.
The
Thanks
last
for
call is
that.
extended a week because it overlaps with the IETF meeting.
Okay. Appreciate it. Yeah, for some reason I missed the transport one, but I did see your call for the architecture one. Okay, so up next, Akira.
Yes.
Can you share your slides, or do you want me to? It's coming.
Yeah, just a minute. What? Okay. Is my mic working?
Yes, we can hear you. Okay.
Yeah. I forgot how to flip the. Oh, there it is. Yes. So we had a hackathon in Japan team. So I in this slide I was a little bit hurry, so I didn't list up all the people, but usual from Secom, Isobe-san, Takayama-san, and also Tragio is Kikuchi-san, Nagata-san, and Suzaki-san. I think it was me, and I think that's all. And the objective was go through the implementation for the what was added from the last IETF, and the first one was soup, but the other one added to the draft is eat, and kose is which is a significant updates. So that's going through and finding any point to revise or update on the draft. And this is the to eat model or attestation model. I saw it frequently in Dave's slide in 2019. So one is passport model and one is background check model. And in the current TEEP protocol draft, it's supporting assuming it's honestly it's identical with the background check model. And yeah, we thought about should we what should we go only for a background check model, and for in our implementation, it's handling talking with the verifier directly from the device is a bit more overhead for the constraint device. So TAM doing on their side instead of the device side is yes, it's nice for the implementation friendly for the device. So however, it might be okay to make, or the discussion was it might be okay to make the draft a little bit more generic. So in the future, some of the device which is able to talk with the verifier directly and able to do the passport model. Yeah. So yeah, at this time we really didn't have much idea what to do to make it generic. So one of the idea was just having the attestation result or evidence format in the EAT profile is able to distinguish whether it's receiving attestation result or evidence. Yes, but yeah. And then next is about CBOR format and CBOR and JSON. So EAT is going to have JSON and CBOR format supporting both. And the current current um, current TEEP protocol draft have two member or two what do you say it two places to describe. So evidence format and another one is evidence. And honestly, in the implementation, whether evidence format is going to say it's a JSON or CBOR, evidence in the both JSON or CBOR and B string will work. Yeah, it does work. But however, the discussion was making evidence to have both B string or T text have both type and able to distinguish whether it's evidence going to have a B string or text is from the evidence format. It might be more friendly, easier to understand. So evidence format having indication of the JSON or CBOR. Or alternatively was in the transport layer, it has a type saying application JWT or application CWT. Yeah.
I
We
think
didn't get
Hannes,
into, yes?
sorry, Akira. Hannes is up on the queue. He might have a comment.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, Akira. It's Hannes here. I wonder whether we should just say that the EAT is in CBOR format rather than leaving the options possible for having both encodings, like we made at some point in time the decision that the TEEP protocol is also only encoded in one format. And I think that's easier to do. I don't think we should support all sorts of different formats just because it's possible. I think we should make our life easier.
Dave? Dave, did you have a comment? You're in the queue. Yeah.
Yep, just finding my mute button. So the TEEP protocol itself just carries EATs as opaque data, right? It doesn't actually care, right? There's nothing in the TEEP implementation itself that cares about this, because like in the background check model, all you do is you take the blob and you forward it on to a verifier, right? So there's no hard dependency here. So that's why I don't think it's necessary to do any hard restrictions, because it's just a payload. Think of this as like a transport for a higher level protocol. You need some end-to-end agreement or whatever, sure, but the TEEP protocol itself doesn't actually care. When you're doing a constrained implementation, I agree with Hannes, but there's no reason the TEEP protocol should be constrained to that I know of right now. I mean, I'm open to it. But I think what I originally got in the queue to say was that for media types, I think that application JWT and application CWT are too generic. They don't mean that they're EAT. It just means that that's a JWT or CWT. And so often in media types, you have more specific media types than just the generic ones. And so here, I think there's an argument that says the RATS working group should define EAT specific. I don't know. Remember, it already does. I just can't remember if it does, if I've seen that anyplace. It should have EAT specific media types for JWT and CWT rather than the suggestion ones there. There should just be more specific ones, application / EAT plus JWT, something like that. That gives you a more constrained media type as kind of the media type guidance. But otherwise, that was my comment. So thanks.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay. Yeah, we will. Yes. Well, we could keep discussing and update the protocol about EAT. And the other thing is, yes, this was the most of the discussion we had. Yes, we decided to use COSE for the signature and algorithm for the CBOR, the same way as the suit handling, because suit is handling COSE, and if we decided to use different way other than seat or eat for the TEEP, then implementing for different implementation will be difficult. I mean, it's not difficult, but it's more time consuming and more overhead for debugging. So so we would like to have we're going to use COSE and also the supported Cypher Suite, which is required, which is recommended, which is optional, will be not far away from suit and eat. And the easiest one came up as going to be required to the implement, and for the implementation is have SHA-256, because that's already required in suit. And on the device side, required to implement either of one is ES256 or EDDSA. And device side, implementing either of one is probably okay. For the TAM side, it might be better to write it here. Good to have better mandatory to implement both. And recommended implementation, yes, this is what Hannes have been talked in the past, and having HSS LMS for quantum resistant purpose. And other one, pretty much typically used RSA, AES, symmetric key AES, and RSA is still widely used in many places. And also the other one is even the AES is AES ACCM, and some of the industry domain is shifting from CCM to GCM. So I thought it would be nice to have put it in the optional list. And so far, I couldn't find the SHA-3 in the IANA registration, but if that going in, then probably good to have in the optional list. And yeah, this is something I wasn't. Nobody in the Japan side knew what to do. So when going to use RSA, specifying key length is very important. 1024 is a little too weak, and mostly it's recommended to have over 2048, and many of them now is using 4096. So we'd like to have how to specify key length of the RSA, and I wasn't in the export in this IANA registration COSE format. So I really would like to have help on this.
Okay, you've got Hannes coming up on the queue, Akira.
Okay.
Akira, do we need RSA actually?
Well, it's well, it's still. My point of view is make it generic as possible, so many of the product or many of the company or many of the entity will use TEEP as much as possible. So I'm not saying we should or it's good to have RSA or not, but it doesn't. I thought it won't hurt just having in the optional list.
Okay, optional, yeah. Because I don't see requests for RSA these days, at least in my environment anymore. So I'm curious, like, is actually still someone asking for it?
Oh no, it's not. Nobody is asking for it. It's just so the most important is in the page six in the sides, the left side, required and recommended list, and the right side is all optional. So yeah, it's optional, so the people will freak out if it's AES is not in the list or SHA-512 is not in the list.
Okay.
And also, I think this topic is going to be in the Davis slide too, so we could continue talking about this.
Was that your last slide, Akira? I thought you had one more.
I think,
Yeah,
yeah,
there
I
you
think,
go.
yeah, that's it. And one thing I would like to mention is I'm getting a permission is the implementation for the TEEP is going to be publicly available as open source before the next IETF 114. Yes. Engineering side, technical side is mostly complete, not yeah, from a while ago. Only thing pending is administrating point. Yes.
That's great, Akira. So it would be
Yes.
great if you posted I'm presuming it would be on GitHub, the open
Yeah.
source. If you can post
Yes.
it to the mail list, that would be awesome.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So our plan from been planning was having both hosting of the GitHub and also having a Docker image. So preparing the build environment is easier.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Akira.
Thank you.
Dave, I think you're back on.
Okay. Waiting for the screen share request.
Yeah. I'm not able to. Oh, that's weird. Okay.
There it goes.
There were two of you there, and I just had to find the right one to give you the.
Yeah,
Okay, you've got it now.
interesting. It's unlike the previous time. This time it's asking me to choose a deck to share rather than sharing my own screen. Maybe I clicked the wrong button, so I'm going to dismiss this and ask again. So.
Yeah.
There.
Well, I was afraid to revoke one and the other, so I just gave it to you once.
Okay. You should have just gotten another request.
Yeah, I see it.
It's still okay. It's still going to do a remote one, so that's okay. I'll do it this way, but it's not asking, not allowing me to share screen.
Do you want me to okay. Are you good?
No. It gave me the drop down from the uploaded slide, so I'll just do it this way. That's just fine. There's no changes, so I just got to get used to this interface. So, okay, so now we're under the TEEP protocol spec, and so Akira's presentation will also affect the protocol things too, and so one of those points, as Kira mentioned, we'll come back to. So I got this organized in terms of general stuff, then the suit related section, and then the rats related section at the end in that order. So Okay, so first, the document has been updated with things that we already agreed at IETF 112. So just to refresh your memory, I'm not going to go through these in detail because they're in the minutes, and we just tried to do exactly what we got consensus on and confirmed on the list back at 112. And so you can see 40 had to do with an efficiency change of being able to reuse stuff as long as all these constraints are true. We went through that at 112. And then we updated the clarifications. When is the token included in the update message? So if there's questions, feel free. But since we discussed that last time, just letting you know that those are the first changes, is stuff that we already agreed there. This is the continuation. We said that there were going to be suit manifests, and Kira presented at 112 the different examples there. And so we took the details out of the presentation at 112 we went through there and put those into things in the spec. That I think, if I remember right, Akira had posted this pull request, but it wasn't merged prior to the ID deadline before, and then we presented it at 112. And so you've all seen it, and all the stuff that Akira presented is merged. So, all right. So now we're going to go into suit-specific stuff that is more than just what we talked about at 112, things that have come up in discussion or in implementation or that was listed as open issues before. Because our goal is to be at 0 open issues, and so, or at least at 0 that were filed before. So, all right. So back at IETF 111, meaning 2 IETF meetings ago, Brennan had a great presentation about examples, not of manifest, but of suit reports, right? And so here's an example in the bottom right of one of Brennan's slides from 111. And so there's now an appendix that takes the content of those slides and put those in appendix as example suit reports. There is a request from me to Brennan to say, hey, can you please check that? Because I'm not sure I got the text right that goes with it. And I want it to be as close as possible to the way that Brennan would have presented it. And so just a request. Yeah, I see Brennan saying, will do. Okay, great. Since these were your slides, the point is to be as accurate as possible as to what your recommendation was there. And this is just an appendix just because it's samples, right? It's not normative. So, all right. Everybody else from suit is welcome to review them too, but I consider Brennan the most authoritative because they're his examples. So, all right. The next one that we had some discussion about, but we didn't have proposed text before, but we did discuss it last IETF, was about removing, and we started using the term unlinking a trusted component. Okay. And so here, things that we did do is we added the suit manifest example that we walked through at 112, where that manifest example was a case where you were unlinking, removing a ref count on a trusted component, and that was done using the directive unlink to decrement the ref count, right? So we talked about that last time, but there was no pull request, so we put that into the actual document then. We left the details of how to do that to suit. So in other words, we didn't go through lots of things because it's a normal suit manifest thing. It's not really a TEEP specific thing. And so the details, we said we're going to leave the details to suit documents and just cross-reference them. And we just had a suit manifest example of here's how you would apply that in a TEEP case. But this did result in adding a reference to a newly adopted suit document, which was split out of the suit manifest. In the suit working group, we had, in order to get the suit manifest document done as fast as possible, then we took some of the things that were still being discussed, split those into separate documents. And so the suit trust domains is one part of that. And so we then had to add a reference to the split out document, which is now an official suit document that will be discussed in the suit meeting later this week. So TEEP people, please come to suit. All right. 167, this is the one that Akira was referring to about the Cypher Suite. So this is another view of that same slide that Akira said that we'd come back to. So if you have any other comments, this is the slide to get up back at the mic line for it. So at 112, we said we were going to get rid of the TEEP specific stuff in terms of an INA registry and just use the COSI algorithms registry, right, for reasons that Akira explained, right? And so here is a table that reflects what the text in the document says. The table isn't in the document, but it matches the logic in there. I put it in the table form just for slide viewing here. And so in the new TEEP spec, there are signing algorithms, encryption algorithms, and MAC algorithms, and there's a list of possibilities in there. And in the past, we'd agreed that for the mandatory ones, that both of them were on look at the signing algorithm, top 2 rows there. They were both mandatory at the TAM to allow the TEEP agent to pick either one. Okay, so that was the previous working group consensus that says there's two of them. Maybe one is more forward-looking, one is more practical right now, but the point is the TAM must do two of them, and neither of them individually is mandatory for the TEEP agent. You're just required to pick one or the other, and since the TAM supports both, you'll always get interoperability. All the other ones there are listed as maze, and that's the stuff you guys were just talking about. And Hannes, you're asking, do we really need RSA and so on? Those are all maze right now. And so whether we list maze or don't list maze, because technically you could argue that everything in the Cozy Algorithms registry is a may, right? And so how many maze do we need to call out versus just saying everything else is a may? I don't know. This is what the document has right now, because this was the least change from previous. And so if you think that we should remove maze or add maze, no big deal. We can do either one or leave it as is. But the musts on here at the top is what we'd previously said, just translated into Cozy Algorithms. But since before it did not make a distinction in the document before this version between encrypt algorithms and MAC algorithms, you can see which ones are currently listed as musts right now in the Cozy Algorithms, and feedback welcome on whether that is the right set of musts. So I will pause for a second just to make sure nobody's going to get up at the mic line, but otherwise this is what the document says right now.
Yeah, I think you can keep moving.
Okay, will do. All right. So this, Kira was alluding to this, the proposal from the Suit 112 meeting, okay, and I think Russ was part of this discussion, was that, to say something like, in the TEEP context, must implement HSS LMS, which is now RFC 8778, because it's quantum resistant, and should implement ECDSA and may implement others, right? This is from the slide at IETF 112 suit, okay? Now what you'll notice is that HMS LMS is not on the previous slide, okay? And so the question for the working group is, what do we do about that discussion as reflecting the previous slide? And so, for example, you see, should we, for example, add HSS LMS to the table and drop ES256 on the previous slide? You can see ES256 is up here as a must for the TAM, and a TEEP agent can choose that or ECDSA or EDGSA. And so do we drop that one? Do we add HSS LMS? So this is one of the editors want to know, what should we do? And if we change something over here, what does it look like on the TEEP agent part of that slide? So any direction from the working group as to what they think the right thing is for HSS LMS on this slide.
You've got Russ on the queue, and then
Excellent.
Hannes.
Russ first, then Hannes. Yeah.
Russ, go ahead.
More permission. Sorry. So the I think that it's not appropriate to push HSS elements to this level. The argument we made was that for a firmware load, you could amateurize the big signature there across a lot of software. But here we're talking about an environment that could be quite small, where the update is not necessarily a full firmware load. So the other thing we were saying is this allows us to move to a post-quantum environment once we know what those algorithms are, and once we do know what those are, we could push that new algorithm here, which is most likely going to have a more reasonable signature size. Anyway, that was my thought. Don't change these for now, is what I'm suggesting.
Okay. Thank you for repeating, because your audio wasn't great for your first sentence, but the takeaway is leave the table as is for now, is I think the main point you're making.
That's what I heard. Go ahead,
Okay.
Hannes.
Dave, if you swap over to the next slide, I wasn't quite sure on, could you go, yeah. So is for the first proposal from IETF suit meeting, was that on the server side or on the client side?
Russ is the best person to answer that, since it was actually his proposal. So.
Okay. But yeah,
again,
whatever Russ said made sense to me.
For suit, not for TEEP.
Yeah. So I'm good with the suggestion Russ made.
You're good with Russ's. Ming, Ming, did you have a comment? You were on the queue and then you left.
Yeah, I'm okay. So I was asking whether we should add into may. Well, we can between the must and should. Well, we don't put a must, but we may put in may. But I think it's okay to, as a group, Russ, we can defer it. When we see need,
A
we can
would
come
be
up with
okay
a
with me.
compromise. Yeah, yeah,
Say that again, Russ?
Adding it to the may list is fine with me.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think that it will be good too. Yeah. Thanks.
All right, so what I'm hearing is that it's okay to add to a may. I think just so we don't forget the point, I think as an editor, I would probably open up a request to just add it to the may list, so it's stays as a reference from the document, rather than oh, did you even talk about it, right? So it's at least an intentional may as opposed to a apparent omission. So
Yeah. Akira, you're in the queue?
Yes. To write it in the CDDL in the TEEP protocol format, I was copying the description from the soup. So CDDL, there's three words used instead of a must or may or should. So it's required and recommended and was optional. So yeah, probably it's pretty much the same with the must going to be required and may is optional. And HSS LMS, I'm fine with having as recommended. Yes.
I think we have consensus. Did we lose Dave? Dave? You still there?
I can still hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, your video froze there for a little bit.
Yeah, I lost you guys, but as long as I'm back, as long as I can keep hearing an echo for myself in the thing, I'll keep going. So, all right. So I'm going to keep moving on since I don't think there's anybody else in the queue, but tell me to go back if I need to. All right. We're now going to move into the EAT section. So now for RETS folks, and so all but the last summary slide left is about attestation claims and so on. Okay. So issue 171.
Oh, no.
Maybe you share, because then maybe that's better.
But we lost Dave altogether. We lost. It's us. It was.
Yeah, it keeps going out now and then, but you know, I
Yeah,
had
no,
internet
we
connection
actually
just
lost
fine.
everything, Dave.
Yeah, but you can hear me now. I can hear it.
Yep. So the
All
question
right,
is
so it
whether
just
I
lost the
should.
share. You're welcome to project. Okay, but I'm going to try it again here. All right, and so we
Okay,
were
you're back on.
around. We were somewhere around right
You were
here,
in
I think. Slide
yeah,
10.
that's where you were.
Okay. All right, so we're saying the RATS working group defines the notion of an EAT profile, and this is what the EAT document says you must specify when doing an EAT profile, right? And we've said we need to have an EAT profile for how does TEEP use EAT, right? And so that's what issue 171 is. So what's listed there is just the bullet items that are the required things in the EAT spec that you must do the following, okay? So that's our checklist. So we're going to walk through that checklist. Okay, so the first one, and by the way, there could be errors in these, but our intuition was it's always better to put something, even if it's wrong, because people will tell us that it's wrong, right? And so there's no claim that these are necessarily the correct answers, but these are answers, right? So people can tell us, oh, no, this is wrong, you should do X instead. So that's the goal here. Keep that in mind, okay? So the first one, we needed something that was the profile label. And so right now, and so the profile labels are encouraged to be URIs. And so right now for that URI, since we just need something as a placeholder, we're using the draft name. So here's the URL of the draft, with a note that says eventually the URI will be the RFC number, right? There's nothing in the EAT spec that says there's a convention to use for the URI. So I'm making one up that says the RFC URI is the URI to use. RAT's working group might say use something other than that, but since there may be changes between now and then, we at least wanted a temporary URI, and certainly the draft URI is going to be a temporary one. So I see Hannes
You've
getting up
got
to mic.
Hannes on the queue.
Dave, I wonder whether that profile label should also include other options, because it looks like a very long URI for each attestation, right? Even if it's only the RFC number attached to that URI, to the data tracker something, or RFC editor. Yeah. So maybe there should be maybe some profile labels sort of registered for standards track or something like this. You know what I mean?
I'd say that would be a topic for the RATS working group. That we
Okay.
would follow whatever convention they set, and right now my understanding is there is no convention, and so we had to at least pick something. But I think your
Okay.
comment would be a very appropriate comment to make in the RATS working group.
Okay, I will do that.
So then there's the next section is just about not keys per se, but just use of CBOR and other encodings. And so we already agreed that there's only CBOR. We've already made changes in the protocol spec before to use definite length arrays and maps. And so I've extrapolated from there. Only definite length strings are allowed. There's a note about preferred serialization, and you have to say what encoders and decoders have to do. And so right now, the proposal is encoders must use preferred, and decoders need not accept non-preferred. So if you want interoperability, use the preferred serialization. We never use CBOR tags. We had an issue about that, I think 2 IETFs ago, where we had that agreement. There's a whole section on freshness. And detached EAT bundles, I am not the expert on, so we arbitrarily said DIB use is permitted. Okay, hopefully audio just came back. Yeah. So my analogy was that detached EAT bundles, as long as we're going to allow severed suit manifest, then maybe detached EAT bundles are similar, but open to feedback on that. Go ahead.
Hannes.
Yeah, almost.
Hey, you both start with H. Hank is on the queue.
Hi, I'm Hans.
Hank in
Sorry,
disguise.
I'm Hank. So I want to say that your profile for EAT looks like a cool EAT, which is a problem, I would say, in RATS again, because most of these decisions here, I think, are very good demarcation line where we want to cut maybe things off and do into other IDs, and this looks like a good core for EAT. So while you are bringing this up here as a profile for EAT, I'd even go so far in saying this could be the core EAT. Not talking about the detached EAT bundle because that's new and, you know, so, but the rest, actually, I'd say that could be EAT. Maybe we should say that's at RATS also. Yeah.
So
We'll
Hank,
follow
are you
whatever RATS
volunteering
recommends.
or are you asking
I'm
Dave?
volunteering saying that pull request 171, I guess it's a pull request, right? Or was an issue? I don't know. The thing in GitHub on TEEP that is 171 could be a good bundle that we can publish soon.
That is the minimum required that
Yeah,
each
because
should
this
have.
looks
And
really much like the minimum requirements that we need.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
that's fair, but, okay.
Well, this is really the first example of an EAT profile, right? So we're kind of pioneering and setting an example, right? I don't know of any other EAT
Yeah,
profile.
there are others. So and Hannes was saying, not so much because I know of a TSA token and
Oh,
such.
okay.
So it's PSA token, and yeah. So no, this is not the first, definitely.
Right, cool.
But I think it also overlaps a lot. So Hannes, if you can't see anything here that wouldn't align with C, and so this could be EAT, maybe the core of EAT. Okay, I will bring this up. Yeah, I volunteer, so to say. I will
Okay.
be the bad guy. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great, Hank, because right now we have text in the document for this, and it'd be great to remove text and just reference an EAT section that has, you know, a default or a core profile or whatever you want to call it. So, all right. So I'm going to keep going on to the next section of the checklist. So now we get into algorithms and things. And so for Cosay algorithms, that was the slide that we just walked through. That was that table, and that's in a different section. So that checklist is see previous slide, right? Well, I guess I had detached deep bundle on this slide. That's a duplicate. Never mind. And then for verification key identification, I tried to make something up here. So happy for somebody to tell me it's wrong and what I should say instead. And so verification key identification, right now it says the Cosay key ID is used with the key ID is the hash of a public key, or the public key may be used as a raw public key or a public key in a certificate, but it's the hash of the public key. Hoping that's at least something that's not broken. And for endorsement identification, right now it says it's optional, but the semantics are same as the previous line. So again, this was a put in something, and if people have a better suggestion or think it's wrong, then they'll tell us, but that's the straw man. Okay. Seeing nobody at the mic line, I'm going to keep going.
Hannes?
Yeah, hi Dave. On the key ID, so what I've seen being done, which is in some sense a little bit unfortunate, is actually to use the claims inside, for example, the instance ID as a way to identify the key, and that's not necessarily the hash of the public key. It's for example a UUID or something similar. So maybe that's more recommended recommended approach, but there are all sorts of different schemes for naming sort of like the specific instance of the device or the chip that you are testing. So
in TEEP, we allow certificates or raw public keys, and we were talking about claims. I interpret that as something that would only apply to certificates. How would that apply if you're using raw public keys?
Like it would, even for raw public keys, you can attach a name to it.
Okay.
Like the raw public key is like conceptually like it's like a symmetric key, right? In that sense, from the lookup point of view. Yeah.
If you'd like to propose specific texts that you think are consistent with, say, other EAT profilers or whatever, I'd be happy to match. Again, this is a case where I was trying to tease out suggestions. So.
Okay, cool. Mm-hmm.
But if you're doing something in another document, and there's a good reason to say, hey, in a constrained implementation, you should be able to do two different things that use the same rule, and so consistency across EAT profiles is great. If you want to point me to something else that says, hey, let's propose pulling this text out of another document, or even moving this into the core EAT profile or something like that, and just reference kind of EAT spec, I'm all for that. So.
Yeah, just to jump in, Ben Kadek as the responsible AD, to hammer through Hannes's point about the key ID. Like there are cases where the key ID might just be a single byte 01, depending on, and it's not required to be tied to the specific key material at all. So if Hannes could propose some slight text changes here, because the current text on the slide is sort of saying that it's always the hash of the public key, and that's misleading.
Okay.
Let's move
Sounds
on.
good. Thanks, Hannes. You have the action on this one. Okay, so claims. Yeah. So now we get into the claims part, and we've had lots of discussion, including at the TEEP Suite Rats interim meeting about claims. Okay. So right now in the EAT profile, all the claims relevant are in the optional claims section. Right? There's no single case where a particular claim is actually required in all possible TEEP cases. Right. So the next slide actually has all those claims. But right now, they're all in the optional section. There's nothing in the required or prohibited sections. And so when we get to the next slide, keep that in mind in case you think there's something on there that should be listed as required. And so the next slides cover all the claims that are relevant for the EAT profile for TEEP, but none of them are individually required, right? You got to have enough to be able to pass stuff, but there's no single one that I could think of that was actually required. But I want you to keep that in mind and get up to the mic or whatever if you see something that you think, oh, no, that should be required in all cases. Okay. The last point is worth mentioning here for suit folks, just in case Brendan or Hank or somebody says that it's wrong, please review this, so call attention to it. For manifest and software evidence claims. Okay, so right now the software name claim in RATS the placeholder is that the software name claim holds the URI of the suit manifest for that component, right? We need something that's a unique identifier for that. And so right now, Brennan suggests the canonical URI, but it's still the canonical URI of the suit manifest, right? As opposed to some other URI. In other words, we're referencing the software component by its suit manifest as being the official ID, right? So that's the proposal. And yeah, I get, we can add the word canonical in front of URI if that makes people happier. I agree with Brennan's point there. But since this is a point that we never discussed before, how do you marry the EAT requirements with the suit manifest? And so the proposal is, oh, Brennan, please get up the mic and tell me what words you'd like changed or whatever, because if you have a suggestion, I'm happy to accept. Okay, or paste it into the chat if you want a specific wording there. Otherwise, I'll go on if I don't see somebody at the mic. So, okay, I'm going to go on. I'm going to have to go back.
There's a specific element in the suit manifest called the canonical URI.
Yeah.
It's the point of it is to point back to a place that you can find a full copy of the manifest. So that should probably be the right tool for the job.
Okay. Yep, makes sense. And so it'd be, like canonical hyphen URI or however it appears in the suit spec. Okay, actually, I make sure I didn't miss a slide here. This is the next one. Yeah, okay. So just wanted to, so this issue 165 was the one that was discussed at the intro meeting where we went through the various claims that were in the draft Burke-Pauls rat suit claims. That document defines some system claims and some suit-specific claims, and so the relevant discussion for TEEP was on the system claims section of that document. This gets back to one of the points that Akira was talking about, and Akira talked about the background check model and the passport model, where in TEEP we've said the background check model is the one that is the more typical because it works better with constrained devices for TEEP. But it turns out that the passport model is not actually precluded in TEEP if somebody wants to do that, and that gets to the point that the TEEP protocol does not actually have a hard dependency on the evidence format or the EAT format or whatever, because it's just a pass-through, right? So it turns out you could actually use the TEEP protocol with attestation results, for that matter, in the passport model, right? You'd stick it into the field that's currently labeled evidence, and so I'll probably file a pull request and just point this out, that whether it's evidence or attestation results, just typically evidence, right? Your EAT could be an attestation results EAT if you're using the passport model, okay? So the point is that the claims that are in here, that are in the profile,
Uh-oh. Yeah, I think it's Dave. Let me revoke his screen.
you can hear me okay? Yeah, I hear you, Echo. All right. So I was saying
We just
that,
keep losing you.
yeah, the claims that are in the lists on the next slide and things are really things that remember the TAM is a relying party. The relying parties consume attestation results, not evidence. So the claims that are talked about in the profile is really things for which the attestation results need to be able to report to the TAM. Now, often the claims in the attestation results are going to be derived from claims in the evidence. So the claims that we're talking about might be things that appear in the evidence for a purpose of being copied into attestation results. But at the end of the day, these are claims that the relying party needs to be able to get. Okay?
Hank is in the queue, but
Yeah, but I want to talk to Dave, so I'm just waiting my time, sitting down, looking at the QR code.
we lost him altogether.
Periodically, Dave getting in. On the,
Dave appears to be offline.
I was just trying to say a joke. Dave's picture on the changes to his picture when he was young, so.
He's not there.
Yeah, Akira, I think Dave completely dropped off because I see he shows off offline. Oh, now I don't see him at all.
But maybe you can show them the last, I think it was actually
So this is Henk. I want to make a comment on the third bullet item of the previous slide we have seen. That says that claims and attestation results can be copied over from evidence. So I have a relatively good visual memory. And that is a big problem. And there's Dave.
All right, if you can hear me, can you repeat your comment, Hank?
Sure, no problem. So hi, this is Henk. I've read on the list I have to state my name. So I'm consistently doing this now. Hi. So I think the problem here is with the third bullet item on the previously shown list. Nancy is going there.
Yeah, Dave, since we lost you, I decided to just share the slides for you.
Yeah.
But I
No,
forget.
one up. 15 is fine.
This one?
Yeah, so the third item says claims and attestation results might be copied from evidence. That's bad. Because now you do not know what that means. If you just do a copy of the value into an attestation result, what the semantics now are is this is created by the verifier, because attestation results are created by the verifier and they're conveyed for consumption to the relying party. So the verifier created this claim. It is very important to add to the definition of that claim that when it appears in attestation result, this is not evidence, but this is the output of a policy that does a, I don't know, byte copy of the value from evidence into the attestation result one by one. There's a policy that says if I like the rest of the evidence, then I can copy this as complementary information into an attestation result, which is very different to the fact that it appears in evidence that has a different meaning. So now I would be stuck with understanding who signed that conceptual message, and you are not obligated to say this is an attestation result EAT. It's just a CWT, never forget that. Now you have to understand that the signature is doing the context and semantics, and that's really bad. So there has to be an out-of-band agreement between the relying party and the verifier that this is a copied over value from evidence. And if you can't establish that out-of-band context, this is broken. I just have to really point that out, okay? Unless you're doing something else that is co-locating another verifier on the entity that's the relying party, and then say, sure, we can relay that evidence actually, and the relying party has a stop verifier that can make sense out of that, and now evidence, but that is co-located with attestation results. I think that's a very underestimated problem for consistency, and it will break a lot of levels of things, and if not done right. So I think item 3 is really dangerous if not done correctly.
Also, Hank,
I'm back again, but I don't know if we should go on, or if Nancy, you want to summarize where we're at or what to do next.
well, can you do like a succinct summary? And also, I want to make sure that it gets captured in the
Don't do
notes.
3 without explicit highlight that there's policy on the verifier that did this copying. Always imply if a raw value from evidence appears in attestation results with this name, same claim type, claim name, right? Make sure there is out-of-band policy established. That's then you, oh, Jesus.
We
I
lost
can't do
Dave
this.
again.
I'm not doing this.
It seems like, well, the policy would be out of scope, I think. Yeah. But the,
Text on having policy is not out of scope. No. Defining how this is done, yes. But there has to be text. Either you agreed on policy or you're doing something harmful to the internet.
Okay,
Yeah, that's it.
I would think that's more of a security consideration.
I think that is a design flaw that has to be documented.
If I have audio right now, then the point is that third bullet there is just a statement about what a verifier could have policy that it chooses to do. There's nothing that TEEP, this is just an informational note to the reader that says a verifier could have that policy. From the parts that I could hear of what Hank was saying, I actually agree, and there's nothing in TEEP that actually says other. So I think what Hank said, the intent is that the draft says what Hank said. The slide is just an FYI. By the way, your verifier could choose to copy stuff. What TEEP actually depends on is having some claims in the attestation results, whether they come from evidence or someplace else. The TEEP has no way to know because it only sees the attestation results at the relying party. So.
And that is a big problem. The TEEP must know. Just saying, and the TEEP can't know, is a design error, and I would oppose that.
Okay, then we'll have to talk about that because
Yes.
when talking about a relying party, any particular relying party that sees attestation results has no visibility in what the evidence is. That's not the relying party's
Exactly,
job.
but it can't know that you got evidence because you're copying evidence in. And as you just said, it has no dealing with that. You're breaking a rule here. That's
I
not
don't
good.
understand your point.
Okay.
I don't know what rule you're breaking, so. Like I said, I only heard what you're
You
summary
are
now. You may have
conveying
heard-
evidence to a relying party, period.
I think as long as he
No,
documents the notes and the policies.
If it's contained in attestation result, it does not
Evidence
change
is
a
never
thing.
conveyed to a relying party ever.
Yeah, but item 3 says so.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does. And this
You're-
is our
you're
this is
misinterpreting
our
it then.
disagreement. This we have to talk about. Yeah.
The
Because
evidence
the-
never goes to the relying party.
Sorry again.
What happens here is it says the claims in the attestation results might have been copied by a verifier, not the relying party from the evidence. The relying party
Yeah.
just sees the
Yeah,
attestation results.
but if they are just copied, how do you know who created them? Did the verifier create them? Did the attester create them? Does the relying party understand that? No.
Nope.
Exactly, and that is a problem.
Well, we can talk about that in rats or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't see what the problem is.
Extensively, yes.
but- Okay. So Nancy, can we go on to the next slide? All right. This is the set of claims that we've been talking about all along. You can see draft 07 as the middle column. That's what the draft used to say. What the draft now says is the right side. So you can see all of those are now referenced. Again, this is the system claims category, not the suit claims category. All these reference EAT except for the one that we had the long discussion at the intro meeting. That's the class identifier. That one, there's no other document to refer to yet. So that one still points to the existing Burkhalls document. Where eventually that should point to something, whether we pull that text into this document or whatever else. The point is there is still a class identifier that we need to say something about, and that's what all the discussion in the intro meeting was about. It's just highlighting that this issue isn't, it's closed to the extent that we can close it now, but it does still have what do we do for the class of device in a TEEP context. So. Since we spent all the intro meeting talking about that, I think we can go on. Since we've had lots of recent discussion. All right. So the proposed next steps are to update the document with feedback from the hackathon, all the discussion from this meeting. The hope is that whatever the next rev is, will be ready for a working group last call, because hopefully we're teasing out all the last issues and stuff now between implementation and spec review, that the implementations are complete enough that we hope all the issues are found that would at least block us from entering working group last call, right?
Yeah,
Of course,
I'm
we'll
wondering, yeah, and I'm wondering, Dave, given the IoT nature of this, we can also trigger an early review to the IoT
Sure.
Directorate and Hack Security Directorate.
Yeah, whether you do that in parallel with working group last call or what, but yeah, that sounds great.
I can do it even before.
Okay.
So once you generate a new version, Dave, let me know and I can kick off the early reviews. How's that?
Okay. Now, I do want to huddle with Hank to see if we can work out what the right thing is in that last point. So that's the only thing that really worries me right now, that I don't have a good understanding. I think everything else we've discussed, I have a good understanding of what the editors
Okay.
can do next. I think Hank's point we want to follow up on to try to work out what the proposal would be. So.
Yeah, and if it could be documented as an issue, that way we all get visibility to
Yeah.
on a path forward.
So
Uh-oh.
Hank, you're welcome to file an issue.
This
if
is
you
not
wanna
an
be-
uh-oh. This is Hank. So, so the thing is that I was talking about exactly that point with Lawrence extensively, and we have prepared two early proposals how to deal with that.
Okay.
And I think
And
there's
rats.
even a very new PR. Look at the latest PR, the youngest PR in the EAT repository. I think Lawrence
Right.
pushed something that's based on the discussion from the hackathon. And it's about
So it
exactly
sounds
that
like we'll
problem.
actually talk about it in the RATS meeting then, yes?
Yeah.
What?
He's saying it should be discussed in a RATS meeting then.
Yeah,
Yes.
it should.
Great. Well, good. I think we're making progress. And Dave, you're like right on time. Sorry I rushed you earlier. Was that it? Yep. Okay. With that, then, we have a presenter. I lost my screen, 1 second. Peng Ling, are you
Yeah.
online?
Yes, I'm here. Hi, everyone.
Hello. Sorry, I'm trying to bring too many windows. Is it this one? Nope. All right, let me relinquish the screen and give you, go ahead and share your slides unless you want me to.
Yes. How do I share the screen?
Okay, it may be easier if I do it. Hold on a sec.
Okay, thank you.
Confidential computing.
I found that.
You found it? Okay.
Yeah. Here, this one.
There we go.
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So, hello everyone. I would like to share maybe a use case or idea about.
Can you
computational
speak up a
computing.
little bit, Peng
Yeah.
Ling? We can barely
Is
hear
that better?
you. Yes, that's better.
Yeah. Okay. I would like to share an idea about computational computing in the computing-aware network. And the reason I would like to share in the TEEP is because that this architecture will use TEEP protocol to implement this computational computing. So next slide is about so first we need to figure out what is CAN, what is a computing-aware network. Literally, it's an idea about which is computing and network resource joint optimization based on the awareness, control, and management over network and computing resource to determine the appropriate service node and dispatch the service request and provide a better user experience. Not only the IETF, but also the ITU also mentioned this idea, like the computing force network or computing power network. Maybe they are a little bit different, but I think the basic idea is similar. So next slide is about the brief architecture of CAN. So in the left picture, it shows that the computing resource consumer and the computing resource provider will communicate with each other by the CAN network and even dispatch or issue a computing task during the network. So the right side of the picture shows that the logic layer of the CAN And the first layer is the operation layer. It's about the computing resource transaction, unified operation, open capability, etc. And the second layer is orchestration and the management layer. It's about the computing resource orchestration, AI engine, and this item should be the base management. It's a mistake, I'm sorry. And the third layer is the CAN foundation. It's about the edge computing resource and the central computing resource. And this resource will communicate with each other by the IP network. And this IP network should be the CAN network. And its protocol haven't been decided yet, but it will be discussed in the BOF of CAN. I think it's Tuesday or Thursday, I'm not sure. So the difference between the CAN and the cloud computing is that CAN is based on network layer. So computing task requirement and scheduling are carried by protocols in IP network. From the perspective of network layer, cloud computing is just an application layer data which cannot be aware by the network. So the advantage of the CAN is that network latency is awareness and the network topology is awareness and the convergence with network source and the computing resource is available. Think about that if you use cloud computing, the cloud computing data flow will just be an application layer in the network, and it's decouple of the cloud computing and the network. So I think the CAN is a better option for the applications that have the latency sensitive and some requirements. Next slide is that why we need confidential computing in CAN. And I think the requirement is from the CAN user. If the computing resource is a third-party resource, like the edge computing resource, which both the CAN and the network user cannot trust its security, then we need the confidential computing technology. So if another is that if the network user cannot trust the computing resource controlled by the CAN, like the central computing resource, then the confidential computing technology is also needed. So when we introduce the confidential computing to the network, I think two components are mostly involved. The first one is that the CPU of computing resource must have the feature like the confidential computing, like the SGX, TDX, etc. And the second is that the orchestration and the management layer must have the confidential computing feature, which supports like TEEP and RAS. So next slide is the main architecture. So I think lots of you have familiar with TEEP and RAS, but in this architecture, we added two components. One is middleware and the other is middleware repo. And the reason is that we want the user to use computational computing in a network with convenient, which means that if a network want to use the computational computing resource, it doesn't have to change any of its source code. It just says that, it's a computing resource, it's a computational computing resource, so I just use it. I doesn't have to change anything of my source code. So another function of the middleware is that it can provide like a remote attestation and provisioning instead of let the application itself do the function. I think this is much more convenient than the traditional TEEP or RAS architecture. So this is the main idea of this draft. And the next shows that how this works. So if a application owner want to request for the confidential computing resource, it first will connect to the MOC or the TAM. Then the second step is that the TAM will establish connections to TEEP broker and send the provisioning information like the middleware to the TEEP broker. Step 3 will be that the TEEP broker will trigger this, maybe it's a hypervisor to establish the targeting environment with TEEP agent and middleware. So the mapping between the TEEP concept and the instantiation is that the left side is the concept and the right side is the instantiation in the engineering. So the MLC TAM and the middleware repo may be a computing resource orchestration in CAN, and the TEEP broker may be a function in OpenStack. and the TEEP agent and the middleware maybe some OpenStack initiate the guest VM, which include the TEEP agent and the specific middleware like the Anaxagramine and Chrome. These three names are like some middleware or runtime that could provide a unified or very convenient interface to the user, which they doesn't have to change any of its source code. It is more convenient for the application to use computational computing. So next slide is about the RAS in CAN. So after the first provisioning of the middleware, then the RAS will work on. So the first step is that application owner may ask for a remote attestation. Then the second step is that the middleware triggers the attestation environment to generate a remote attestation evidence for targeting environment. And step 3 is that the application owner gets the reference value. The reference value may be maybe could generate with the source code and the image is like the middleware and the TEEP agent. Maybe it's could query from the third-party authority for the reference value. And the step 4 is that the middleware will return the evidence to application owner, and the owner could match it with the reference value and decide if it will trust the targeting environment. And there is a potential step 5 is that after the trust the targeting environment, the application owner will provision its application to the targeting environment. So after that, the application will run in a trusted and confidential environment. So that's a basic idea of the RAS, how it works in this architecture. And the mapping between the RAS concept and the instantiation is that, for example, the attestation environment could be a court enclave, an SP, and an RMM, and etc. And the targeting environment could be a guest VM, which includes the TEEP middleware and application. And the targeting environment may also be a process-based environment like the SGX. So that in that way, the TEEP agent and the middleware will be a function or routine in a process. So next slide is about the potential next step about this confidential computing in network. Maybe it could be used as a specified TEEP use case about the confidential computing with middleware, or specify the RAS use case about the confidential computing and its middleware. Or it could be that a unified tool or specification for app owner to execute remote attestation and provisioning. So if you are interested in this idea, maybe we could discuss more about that and see how we can move forward about this idea. So if you are interested, please let's have a discussion. Thank you. That's it.
Thanks, Pengling. Hannes is coming up to the queue.
Hi, Pengling.
Hi.
Could you go back 2 slides? I have a question about the drawing to better understand sort of the boxes. So like maybe slide 5 or so. Yeah, so this one. So on the right-hand side, with the DAM and the middleware repository, like that's on the server side. That's the box for the server side. The app owner is obviously, or not obviously, but the app owner is, that would be a different server with the owner, like the human next to it. The arrows, what do the arrows mean in your drawing? Because they are not necessarily, are they protocol messages, or they are, what do they represent? Or internal information flow?
You mean the middleware repo is for the middleware, different middlewares, because in different computational computing architecture, there will have be different middleware to fit into the heterogeneous architecture of that CPU.
Right. So okay. If we look at the boxes on the left-hand side, like you have the target environment and then the hypervisor and CPU firmware below. Is that supposed to be in one device, or because they are separate boxes?
Yeah, that's in one device. That's a different layer of a confidential computing resource.
Oh, but it's a single device in
Yes, it's
different
a
layers
single.
in this. Okay, so in the green box, is that that's in the normal world, so in the REE, is that true?
No. The green box is the trust word. It's the TE.
Oh, that's the DE. Okay,
Yes.
application middleware D. Okay, that's good.
So what
Okay.
I'm trying to say is that the application could just load it into the targeting environment, and without any changes, it could just direct run the application without any change of the source code to fit into the confidential computing CPU.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And the deep broker in many other diagrams, it was running on the rich execution environment, but here you are
Yes.
running it on the hypervisor. That may be a possibility. So like for example, so if I take for example Veracruz as one possible middleware. So the the middleware would be Veracruz, and the deep agent would be somewhere, let's say, where would that be? That would probably be maybe in Opti or so. And the application would be WASM running on Veracruz. Is that sort of roughly how I should understand it? Or I think it would be good to have an example on how this is instantiated, to have a good understanding on how you would actually turn this into a working system.
Here, I think the next slide shows that the concept and the instantiation and how they mapping with each other. And this is the very earlier draft of this idea, and maybe there's something incorrect, and this is just the meaning of it I want to share. So maybe the mapping is not correct, and we can discuss it more about that after the meeting, I think.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Gary, you're on the queue.
Yes, thank you. This was interesting. Like Hannes, I can't claim to fully understand all the aspects here. I think we need to read the draft again, maybe, or have more discussions. I do, of course, agree that like it's super useful to have these kinds of capabilities, that you could provide some computing facilities for applications in the network or close to the network, and be able to provide attestations and the protections that TEs can provide. So I think that's good. I did have a question, sort of one detailed question on the read the draft. Section 6 is about the use case examples, and it mentions like VR, AR applications, and it does say that the applications don't want the conversation to be, or the network to be aware of their conversations. But then it also says that it's hard to encrypt all the VR context because of an unacceptable cost. And I would actually argue that that's not exactly what I would expect to see. I would expect to see that there's both protection of the data in transit, so and that we can do. I think we can do that, and also protection of the data in use. So this is what we can do with confidential computing. So it's just wondering, like, if you had any further explanation of this encryption versus computing.
In that use case, I mean that we cannot run all the code in the encryption type. I mean, lots of times it will be executed or processed in plain text in the CPU. So especially you have the TDX architecture or some architecture like memory encryption, then you can run your code in an encryption type.
Right. Yeah, maybe it was just the way that it was written that led me to be confused a little bit. But of course, I agree that you can't always process only encrypted data. You have to have these situations where you get to process the actual unencrypted data, and in order to do that safely, we wrap it inside a confidential computing enclave or something. So, yeah, I think I agree with that.
Yes.
Thank you.
I will revise that for more secure and more correctly.
Any other questions or comments? Nope. So Pingling, Ben also noted that there's a computer-aware network BOF
Yes.
that is scheduled for tomorrow, session 1.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
you know, it may be interesting for you to share those thoughts in that, I don't know if there's a mail list, but in that community as well, in that group.
I'm not sure if they have some time slide to share the material.
Yeah, I was just mentioning that the specific session time slot for the CanBoF was the first one on Tuesday, because I think you had mentioned it was either Tuesday or Thursday. You weren't sure, and I just looked it up.
I think I saw, yeah. Ben, I was looking at the agenda. I think it's tomorrow.
Yeah, it's tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So I
But
think
my
this
note was,
slide is better
yeah.
to share in this group because it's about the security and the tip and rest. In fact, that I think this idea could not only use this in CAN, but also can be used in any network, I think.
Okay. Unless there's nothing else, thank you for your presentation, Pingling, and you know, you can solicit more feedback on the mail list as well.
Okay, thank you.
And I still would encourage you, if there's a mail list for the CAN, since there's a BOF, that you might solicit feedback from that group as well.
Okay.
Okay, any orders of business, comments, feedback? If not, good progress, guys. Thank you.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
have a great week at the IETF, those who are here on site. And hopefully those on virtual can get some sleep. Thanks, everyone. Alrighty. Thanks for the notes, Ned. Yeah, I have to admit, it's a little busy looking between the 3 screens and my phone for the time. Timer. Yeah. Thank goodness, yeah. But there was a lot of, I think there's some well, Dave couldn't hear Hank's comments directly, right? And I think Hank was just reacting to the text on the slide, because the slide said something might copy, right, the attestation results, which Hank is right, unless you have good provenance, then how do you know whether you're getting that result, the original or a copy, and that the copy hasn't been fudged, right? Well, it's a question of context, it's a question of policy, whether the copying is allowed or not. But I don't know that that's in scope for TEEP, and so my suggestion is, in that scenario, it should be listed in the security considerations of it would be a violation of the design if that were to be allowed. Meaning, in big letters, policy do not allow this to happen, right? But if you are going to let it happen, then we need to change the schemas to allow for the provenance to come through.
I think it wasn't clear it was trying to say that there needs to be an exception to the RAT's expectation.
Right. Well, so,
They're relying on RATs to provide context.
so on the chat, Brendan and Dave were saying, well, nowhere in the draft do we say that we, that a copy is allowed or not. Well, now that you let the cat out of the bag, that's what I'm saying. In the considerations, you need to put in the design, the intent is that you wouldn't copy. It's that circular thing. So I lost about 8 minutes trying to get the meat echo and stuff going. Just FYI. Well, so, well, we started almost 10 minutes late. Because I was trying to make sure, remember I was telling you the data tracker didn't, the slides from the data tracker, but the